While America and China are locked in an all-out semiconductor war, Singapore has quietly positioned itself as the Switzerland of the chip industry. Except they're not actually neutral. They're strategically positioning themselves on both sides, while everyone thinks they're just innocent bystanders.
Singapore's position is clear. We are able to support and collaborate with them to expand. We do not see ourselves as a Singapore industry alone.
GIC said that long-term returns remain stable with a targeted and diversified investment strategy.
Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, the GIC, has been playing the most brilliant double game in modern finance. And the numbers are staggering. We are talking about an $800 billion fund making strategic bets across both America and Chinese semiconductor ecosystems, all orchestrated from a tiny island that most people couldn't find on a map. Here's how Singapore turned the world's most important geopolitical conflict into their personal profit machine, and why this strategy might be the smartest play in modern international finance. My name is Elizabeth Ann Stewart, and you are watching Geopolitics and Money. Follow the money, decode the world. Let's start with what everyone can see on the surface, because Singapore has done a masterful job of hiding in plain sight. If you look at the headlines, Singapore appears to be the perfect neutral ground for semiconductor manufacturing. Global Foundries just committed $4 billion to expanding their Singapore operations. TSMC-backed Vanguard International is building a $7.8 billion chip plant there. Even Dutch giant NXP is moving major operations to Singapore. The official story is simple. Singapore is attracting investment because they have great infrastructure, skilled workers, and political stability, which to their credit, they do. They're positioning themselves as the safe middle ground where both American and Chinese companies can operate without getting caught in the crossfire. But here's what makes this fascinating. Singapore isn't just attracting investment, they're actively co-investing through their sovereign wealth fund, GIC. And when you dig into the details of where GIC's money flows through their disclosed portfolio positions, you discover something remarkable. They're strategically positioned across multiple sides of the chip war. So how exactly does a country with just over 6 million people convince the world's biggest semiconductor companies to pour tens of billions into their economy? And more importantly, what are they really getting in return? The answer is going to show you why Singapore might be the most brilliant strategic country on Earth. Here's where the story gets interesting, because Singapore's neutrality is carefully constructed theater. Let's talk about the GIC, the Government of Singapore's investment corporation. This is one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, managing an estimated $800 billion of Singapore's reserves. That's more than the GDP of most countries, controlled by a city-state smaller than New York. Now, the GIC officially presents itself as a long-term diversified investor. Their public materials talk about preserving Singapore's international purchasing power and achieving good long-term returns above global inflation. Very boring, very professional, very neutral sounding. But when you examine their actual portfolio positioning in semiconductors through regulatory findings and public disclosures, something else emerges. GIC has been systematically building positions across both sides of the chip war, positioning Singapore as the indispensable middle player that everyone needs. Here's the brilliant part. They've convinced both America and China that Singapore is on their side, while actually being on Singapore's side. Think about it like this. Imagine you're an arms dealer during a war, but instead of just selling weapons, you're providing the neutral territory where both sides meet for peace talks, while secretly owning stakes in both armies' weapons manufacturers. In their own way, that's essentially what Singapore has done with semiconductors. But to understand just how sophisticated this strategy is, we need to look at the specific investments and timing. Because the GIC's move into the semiconductor space reveals a level of strategic planning that would make Machiavelli proud. Let's start with the Chinese side, because this is where the strategic positioning gets really interesting. GIC held a significant stake in SIMC, the Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, which is China's largest and most strategically important chip manufacturer. Through regulatory filings, we know this wasn't a small position. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar portfolio allocation in what is essentially China's answer to TSMC. SMIC is not just a Chinese company, it's the crown jewel of China's semiconductor ambitions. Beijing has poured hundreds of billions into SMIC as part of their plan to achieve semiconductor independence. And there was Singapore's GIC right alongside Chinese state capital, funding China's chip champion. But here's where timing gets fascinating. In August of 2021, right as US-China semiconductor tensions were reaching a boil, GIC quietly reduced their SMIC holdings. Not selling out completely, that would send the wrong signal, just trimming back a little bit. Just trimming their disclosed position from about 5.04% to 4.9%. Whether this timing was strategic foresight or fortunate coincidence, the Biden administration's most aggressive semiconductor export controls against China came later, and GIC had already adjusted their position. Meanwhile, on America's side, Singapore was rolling out the red carpet for US semiconductor companies. But here's the strategic element. They weren't just attracting American investment to Singapore. GIC was building substantial positions across US semiconductor and technology companies through their portfolio. According to their official disclosures, GIC holds approximately 34% of their $800 billion portfolio in US assets. While they don't break down specific investments for competitive reasons, this includes significant exposure to American tech firms, private equity funds that specialize in semiconductors, and companies throughout the US chips supply chain. But the real masterstroke is what Singapore did next. And here's the beautiful part for Singapore. They're getting paid by everyone. American companies are building billion-dollar fabs in Singapore, creating high-paying jobs and transferring technology. Chinese companies are routing investment and operations through Singapore, generating financial flows and trading commissions. And the GIC is earning returns on investments in both ecosystems. It's like being the house in a casino where America and China are the gamblers. Singapore wins no matter who else wins or loses. But there's an even deeper layer to this strategy that most people miss. Because Singapore isn't just playing both sides in the current chip war. They're positioning themselves to be indispensable no matter how this conflict ends. And the way they're doing it reveals something profound about the future of global finance. Here's what Singapore really figured out. The semiconductor industry probably isn't going back to the old globalized model. The future is going to be more fragmented with multiple regional supply chains, and someone needs to be the connector between these fragments. Singapore decided that someone would be them. Look at their recent moves. They're not just building manufacturing capacity, they're building financial infrastructure. Singapore is becoming the place where semiconductor deals get financed, where IP gets traded, where cross-border partnerships get structured. GIC isn't just an investor. It's become a bridge between American and Chinese capital in the semiconductor space. When Western companies want to invest in Asian semiconductor supply chains without directly dealing with Chinese entities, they can route through Singapore. When Asian companies want access to Western capital markets and technology, Singapore provides the pathway. This is why companies like TSMC are comfortable building major facilities in Singapore, even while tensions escalate with China. Singapore offers what Taiwan can't: genuine neutrality backed by financial firepower. And here's the part that should make everyone pay attention. Singapore's model is working so well that other countries are trying to copy it. Malaysia is positioning itself as neutral territory for chip makers trying to avoid geopolitics. Vietnam is offering similar incentives. But they're all missing the crucial element that makes Singapore's strategy work: the financial infrastructure. GIC's $800 billion in assets under management gives Singapore a level of financial firepower that no other small country can match. When Singapore offers to co-invest in a major semiconductor facility, they're not just talking about tax incentives, they're talking about billions of dollars in actual capital. What Singapore has done in semiconductors is a template for how small, strategically positioned countries can thrive in an era of great power competition. Instead of picking sides, they've made themselves indispensable to both sides. Instead of competing on cost, they've competed on financial sophistication and political reliability. Instead of trying to build their own champion companies, they've become the platform that everyone else's champion needs. This strategy works because of a fundamental truth about modern geopolitical competition. Even when superpowers are fighting each other, they still need neutral ground where they can interact, trade, and make deals. Switzerland played this role during the Cold War. Singapore is playing it during the chip war. And the returns have been extraordinary. Over the past 5 years, as the US-China tensions have escalated and global supply chains fragmented, Singapore's economy has outperformed almost every other developed country. Their unemployment rate is near historic lows. Their currency is strong and foreign investment is pouring in. But here's what's really impressive. They've achieved this while maintaining good relationships with both Washington and Beijing. American officials see Singapore as a reliable partner in containing Chinese technological ambitions. Chinese officials see Singapore as a valuable bridge to global markets and Western technology. Both sides think Singapore is on their side, because Singapore has convinced everyone that helping Singapore succeed helps them succeed too. Very, very clever. Here's the lesson that every investor, policymaker, business leader, all of them should understand from Singapore's semiconductor strategy. In an increasingly multipolar world, neutrality isn't about sitting on the sidelines. It's about actively making yourself valuable to everyone. Singapore didn't achieve their position by accident. This required decades of strategic planning, massive capital deployment, and an incredibly sophisticated relationship management. GIC's investment strategy is just the financial expression of a much deeper geopolitical vision. But there's also a warning here. Singapore's strategy only works as long as the benefits of engaging with Singapore outweighs the cost of competing with Singapore. If either the US or China decides that Singapore's neutrality is actually helping their rival more than it's helping them, the whole system could unravel very quickly. The recent case of TSMC cutting ties with a Singapore firm over the Huawei chip discovery shows how precarious this balancing act can be. Singapore companies are getting caught in the middle of US and China's sanctions enforcement, and Singapore has to carefully manage these situations without alienating either side. For now, Singapore's brilliant strategy is working. They've turned the world's most dangerous geopolitical rivalry into their personal wealth creation machine. But history shows us that small countries that try to play great powers against each other sometimes get crushed when those great powers stop finding the arrangement beneficial. The question isn't whether Singapore's strategy is brilliant. It clearly is. The question is, how long can they keep it up as tensions between their two biggest partners continue to escalate? What do you think? Is Singapore's double game sustainable, or are they setting themselves up for a reckoning when America and China decide they have to choose a side? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into how smart money really moves around the world, make sure to subscribe. As always, follow the money, decode the world. And a big thank you to our Patreon sponsors.